who can heal? Who can heal time? I know you made your mistakes. It's a natural act of imperfect act. And in fact, is it really, really such a crime? In events such as these, when our answers proceeded to riddle, 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 riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a rhyme. All through the obstacles around, it's truly only freedom that surrounds. With every breath, a living voice. With every rest, yes, there is a choice. And to see what you want to see, for it to be there must surely be mountains to climb, cliffs to scale, bridges to build, and we will persevere. And we will persevere. And we will persevere. Natural act of imperfect act, and in fact, is it really, really such a crime? In events such as these, when our answers proceeded to riddle, 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 riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a rhyme. It's a riddle in a, it's a riddle. In a
Hey guys, Dave Darren here on a Monday night, a night I usually don't do shows, but for what it's worth, I'm here tonight. And that's kind of what tonight's topic is all about. For what it's worth, I want to talk to you guys about, does money buy happiness? And I'll tell you how this whole thing started. I'll tell you in brief. But there's another radio personality, Heather Wade, and she does a show, and she's kind of in and out, whether she's irresponsible or what the issue is, but she's available sometimes, and a lot of times she's not available. And I'll tell you, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it from my perspective and my life's long history of being financially pretty stable, and earlier on in my life being in a financial nightmare. And I was thinking about it from this perspective. I started thinking about, you know what, maybe you guys got to cut her a little bit of slack. I don't like her. I don't appreciate her. And there's personal reasons why I don't like her. But I thought, you got to cut someone some slack, because I'll tell you what, to do a radio show is extremely challenging, extremely difficult, and it's a struggle. And it can be a financial struggle. If people go into this, and I don't go into this except for just as a hobby mode, but if you go in this with an attempt to make it build your livelihood, and you've got financial stresses behind you and on top of you and on either side of you, it can become a financial nightmare, which can play with your psyche, it can play with your confidence, and it's a kind of a disaster. So when I brought this up, I brought up the topic, does money buy happiness? And I got to tell you, I kind of think money buys happiness to a degree, and we're going to qualify that tonight a little bit. I'm going to play something for you guys, and this is not my voice on this. You can ask what my opinion is if you like to. I'm going to play something for you guys that a lot of you probably won't like, and probably a lot of you won't like my personality or my personal points on this particular topic. But we're going to air this, and I'm going to play this for you, and you're probably not going to like it, and you're not going to agree with what this person says, but you're going to hear it. So here we go.
I can and will have more than I ever dreamed possible. I feel good about money and deserve it in my life. Great wealth is flowing to me now. I now create my wonderful, ideal life. I am thankful for the comfort and joy that money provides to me. I know I am abundant. I always have enough money for myself. Every day, in every way, I am becoming more and more prosperous. I see myself as wealthy, and that's who I am. I choose wealth and abundance. I am worthy of great success. My greatest good is coming to me now. I love abundance in all its beautiful forms. I am wide awake to my abundance. I release all my negative beliefs about money and invite wealth into my life. I am prosperous, healthy, happy, and live in abundance. Wealth is my birthright, my natural state of being. Making money is good for me and for everyone in my life. My income is growing higher and higher now. Money is an important part of my life and is never away from me. All my issues with wealth have disappeared.
Okay, guys, I was going to play a little bit more of that, but you know what? I'm going to stop it right there. I don't even know. I wasn't listening to what it said, but a couple parts in that I'll read to you, whether we got to it or not. I'll read to you a couple of these things. In that dialogue, that speech, one of the things says is, making money is good for me and everyone in my life. All right, you can judge that one on its own, or what you think about it. If you want to, you can call up. By the way, I'd like to say hello to Brig, Richard, Mary, and Brian. What's going on with you guys? Another thing that was said in that thing, I'm not sure if we got to it, but perfect abundance is my chosen reality. That's what the speaker said. And one of the other things he said is wealth is a positive precision of a divine energy. So now you can think what you want about that, or think what you want about what you just heard, but I'll give you my philosophy in this. So I started off telling you about this radio personality named Heather Wade, who in my interpretation, judging from my life and my 61 years on this planet and 9 months in my mother's body, I gotta see. Now we have to say that too, don't we? We gotta be politically correct and see and talk about where we came from. So I'm 61 years old. It's funny I would say plus 9 months in my mom's body, right? So, but let me get back to the point. My point is wealth. Now, my parents are pretty well off. And to be quite honest with you, and I'll tell you the situation that goes on in someone's life. And maybe we can draw an equivalent to why Heather Wade sort of crashes, burns, flakes out, becomes nuts. It could all be because she has a different perspective of radio. And if you think about it, radio personalities, by the way, they make on average, these are the guys on terrestrial radio playing records, playing LPs, playing what now is a playlist. It's not records, it's not LPs, it's a computer file with the determination of what you're going to play on a piece of software. They make anywhere from $28,000 to $32,000 a year. And basically, pretty much that's all they're worth because the creativity of what they do has been taken out. What they do now is they play a playlist and they sit back and they talk when they're permitted to talk. Basically, a monkey who has a couple words of how to say a couple things. You got to get the monkeys from the Planet of the Apes, right? But basically, a monkey with a banana. One time I was going to get on the air, and maybe I should do it during Halloween, dress up like a monkey with a banana and play music and use the tip of the banana to press the keyboard to play the next track, because that's basically what radio is. So anyone that tries to go beyond that by initiating their personality in it and doing like a podcast show, you got to give them some degree of credit. But if they're trying to make financial money out of doing a radio show, believe me, it ain't easy. And believe me, it can become a stressful nightmare where you start having self-doubt. So does that make you happy? I'll tell you something. Money makes me happy. And I can tell you the tragedies that someone goes through at an earlier part of their lives. At one point when I left my parents' place, I was actually living in the same car I've still got in the garage. Maybe I still have it because to connect me to reality. I've got my first car, I had a 76 Trans Am that I couldn't afford, but I owned it. And then I moved out of my parents' house and everything struck brutally at one point. This is the way I was actually lived in the back of that car for about 7 days. And then I decided I was working for General Electric at the time. So I had a pretty decent job, but I was still a very low level in General Electric. So at one point I decided, you know what, I'm going to live in General Electric. So I would find an office that was kind of left open, that had a comfortable sofa on it. Lord knows what the boss had that sofa for. I can only guess. But he had the sofa for me to lay on it from the time of like, I had to lay low in the car and go in the building at 8 o'clock at night. And fortunately, I forget why I was able to get in there at 8 o'clock. You would think they'd have more security than that. Or I forget how I did it. But I got in there like late night, and I would be on the computer till like 8 o'clock, like I was working in case a security guard came and he saw me at 8 o'clock. He'd see me working, and then I would go into the empty room and I would crash on the sofa. One time I got caught. Someone came in early, and I had one of those Casio alarm watches, and I must have set it up wrong. I forget the circumstances because this is a long time ago. But I was woken up by a woman waking me up, and she was very she was cool about it. Like she pretended I wasn't there, stepped out, and I left in a hurry. And then I didn't hear anything about that. Believe it or not, I didn't get fired for any of this stuff. But here's the other thing is I did. There was a track on the roof where if you went in early or went at lunchtime, you could run on the roof. And they had showers. So I actually pretended, and I was in shape enough to be believable, that I was actually a jogger. And I got the shower key so I could shower in the morning. Can you believe the desperation? And then at one point, a long time ago, the vending machines, now I was on the East Coast, we had something called Tasty Cakes, which are kind of like the hostess things, you know, the bad stuff you shouldn't be eating, those cakes. But a long time ago, the vending machines, if you got a coat hanger and you put it underneath the vending machine towards the product, where you could get the product with the clothes hanger bent the proper way, put it in there, lift it up over the little spring mechanism, and drop it down, and then your hand could grab it without paying for it. So can you believe that's the level of desperation some people can go to, and what I went through to survive for about, and fortunately it wasn't for a long time, it was till I got a couple of paychecks, so then I could afford to live on campus, because I was still a student as well, if you can believe that. All these stresses were unbelievable. So that's what I went through. And at one point when I started my own business, I lived in Japan for a while. I want to connect some of this to my Japan lifestyle to tell you why money does buy happiness, especially from an Asian perspective. But for a while, I was actually, well, my train of thought flew away for a second. So, by the way, I got a bunch of people, end of days joined. It's cool. I've never seen this person. I'll say hello to a couple people while I get my train of thought back. That was RNG. I'm not sure what that means. End of days. That sounds like a soap opera. Days of Our Lives. I remember that one. But so this is the stuff I went through when I was a young dude. And like I said, I gained enough finances where I could live on campus. I was living on campus in a dormitory where actually when you turned on the lights, the cockroaches would scatter. That's the type of place I was living at, even though other guys were living there, other dorm members were living in there. The room I got was the room where you turn on the light and the cockroaches scatter. Kind of nuts, right? But that's the way you live at some point in your life. And then when I started my own business, after I left working in corporate America, I decided, you know what? I'm going to venture on my own and start my own career, my own business. So I started off, and trust me, it's not easy to do that. You're going to take an initial hit. I was not financially able to absorb that hit without that hit coming from the hit of using my credit cards. At one point and I remember the figure, I was $53,000 in credit card debt. And at that point I owned a home. I had my first home I bought at the age of 28. I had a mortgage on it. I had a second home because my wife, when she came to the United States, she didn't want to live in the bachelor pad that Dave had bought with all the women he probably had in that bachelor pad. And she was accurate about that. So we bought a second home. So one was a rental, one was our home, and we were 2 months behind on our mortgage on our property and 2 months behind on our rental property. Now I have a tremendous work ethic, probably better than Heather Wade does because I've heard critiques about her work ethic, but I've got a dynamic work ethic. I've got a lot of energy, and I was able to scratch and claw my way out of that disastrous hole, and there was some luck associated with that as well. So I got a very large client, and I was able to turn it around, and I never ever want to live in that perspective again. Never ever, which is why I don't do radio as a livelihood, because to make money in radio, who can you think of that does radio successfully? You can think of Art Bell, who's passed away now. You can think of who else? Rush Limbaugh, Howard Stern. Can you think of more? Can you think more than three? There's other ones that do political chat. There's a Michael Savage, and there's some other people that do political talk. But if you really come down and think about it, you can probably think about 8 people at the most. 8 people that you know that are syndicated. Alice Cooper does a syndicated music show, or at least he did. I don't know if he still does. But he's syndicated on multiple channels. And that's the only way to make money in radio is to have a program that's valued in multiple markets and syndicated out so you're heard. Like Art Bell was on. How many stations was he on? So his program and his voice was on this station, and every time he sold his voice to those stations where they could sell commercials to market his program and market the product announced on his program, that's where the station drew revenue. But Art would sell his program to that station. They had a dollar value associated with it, and so did Art Bell, and that's the way he made money. That's the only way you can make money in radio. Trust me, that's the only way. And I don't have enough time to focus on just doing radio, and that's why I don't focus on just doing radio, and that's why I'm not really gaining momentum. Whereas if I went in 100%, maybe I could have that luck. You got to have luck, you got to have adrenaline, you got to have a lot of stuff going for you. So does money buy you happiness? To trickle back to that, I got to tell you, and I had some people criticizing me talking about, I firmly believe money buys happiness. I firmly believe that. It buys you stability, and it buys you less stress. That's the one thing it buys you, is a lot less stress. Now, if you squander it and screw around, because there's 2 tangents when you have a lot of money. There's one tangent where you'll want more money. You'll become overly obsessed with gathering more and more money. I guess there's 3 tangents. Sounds like that Monty Python skit, where it's the Spanish Inquisition. There are 3 things, and then he gives you 4, and he says, there are 4 things at the Spanish Inquisition. You got to watch that Monty Python sketch. It was a blast. But there's 3 tangents. One tangent is where you become overly obsessed with making more and more and more money. So the treadmill never ends. The second one is where you'll squander it all, and then you'll remember the time when you had money, you squandered it all, and then maybe you'll succumb to drugs or alcohol to hide your sorrows and be able to live with yourself after you massively screwed up. You lost your wife, you lost your family, you lost your friends, you lost everything because you were selfishly squandering your money and living the lifestyle of an egomaniac. All right. The third one is the guy that has probably the guy that didn't have money, maybe a guy like me, didn't have money and came across making a pretty decent living. Maybe not rich, but on the better side of living, which is a better side I live on. It's a side of life I want to live on for the rest of my life. And it takes a logical approach to the money he's got. And that's the guy like me, and that's why I don't squander it on radio, by the way. That's why I don't do that or take the risk that maybe a Heather Wade is taking, and it's a financial risk that you take when you do that. Because radio, you can be, there was a guy, forget his name, Kent Voss, I remember his name, Kent, V-O-S-S, I think 2 S's, Philadelphia radio talk show host on WWDB was a talk station, which now is flipped to like Top 40 or hip hop or something else. But he was on there, and then one day I turned it on, he's gone. No announcement at all. He wasn't reprimanded. He didn't say anything bad that I heard of. He might have said something bad or something that might have happened, but he was on there one day, next day he's gone. Now, where's he going to go? He was on, from what I understood and what I really know, because I met him a couple times, he was on that one station, and that was it. He's canned from that one station. He's got to find another station. It's a limited amount of talk stations, especially back in, this is probably like the late 70s or early 80s. He's got to find another talk station when talk wasn't that popular back then. So he's got a career that's shattered at that moment. So being on radio is pathetically brutal. You're always monitored for your ratings compared to other ratings in the same genre. It's a brutal existence. But so now to relate back to why I think money buys happiness. Depending on where you live, I lived in Japan for a while. Let me see if anyone's talked about anything here while I was turning my back on you guys. And I'm going to write down where I was. I was going to talk about Japan and bring that into the dialogue. But let me see if anyone has anything here to say. She's getting ready for October. That's what Briggs says. Richard says, yes, she's getting better every day. I'm not sure with that. We're talking about Heather. Someone says rest in peace. That's end of day, says rest in peace to Heather. Then Richard says, excuse me, 13 days. I don't know, 13 days of what? Absence? I'm not sure. Then Richard says she's getting better every day. Remember that song, Feeling Stronger Every Day by Chicago. And by the way, last week I had a band on from Chicago that didn't bother to promote the show at all, that they were on, that I represented them to an audience, and then they didn't even share the show, so how dare them. That's why radio is difficult too, because you have guests that come on, and you're supposed to mutually help out each other when you're guests, and if they don't, shame on them, and then you start abandoning your efforts to helping them, and then sort of eventually you abandon your efforts to help out anyone. Let's see. Glenn says, I would say money is, and I gotta enlarge my screen here. Glenn says, I would say money is and of itself can't buy happiness, but having enough money to live beyond paycheck to paycheck certainly paves the way for happiness. Very, very true. That's exactly right. Now, let me say this. The different perspectives, different cultures put more value on money. I lived in Japan for a number of years, and my wife is actually Japanese. One of the things I realized, I was over there when I was 31 years old, and I stayed there for 3 years till age 34. Her brother, who was about 5 years younger than me, actually, he had $250,000 saved up cash available in his bank. Now, putting money in a bank and just putting it there in a low interest, 0.03% interest, is kind of stupid. It was better back then, because I was there in like the 90s. So it was better then, probably. It was like maybe 5% interest at best. But he had $250,000, and he was age 27 in his bank. $250,000 he had, and at that point I had about 40 grand. I was thinking, oh my God, what a nightmare. How can I ask this woman to marry me when I've got that little money in the bank, 40 grand? That's more than most people have now, probably. And I believe that's probably true. And now I've gotten a lot better than that. And I'm not bragging about that. And I'm not going to put the number out there, but it's pretty significant. All right. I'm living better now than I was. Not living greedily, but being conservative with the cash, being logical with the cash, not wasting it on radio programming. And that's what I've got going on now. But you live in Japan, and I'll tell you something else they've got. They've got something called omiai. It's called omiai. That is the arranged marriages. It was more popular when I was living there than it is now. The last 20 years, it's kind of fallen out of favor a bit. But omiai is an arranged marriage. That means that the family meets the family of the two people that they're trying to connect together or hook up, and they make sure that they're on a financially same keel, or that the husband is on a little better, what do they call that? They call it something, I forget. Doesn't matter. He's at a better income level than the woman is that he's going to marry. And they create that match, that omiai, that meeting to take place between the boy and the girl, and that's an arranged marriage, but it's a financial commitment. And I got to tell you something about Japanese women, and this is true of my wife. She values more than the loving relationship, the love, the hugging, the kissing, and all that goes around that. She values security over and above all that. Now, it doesn't mean that she doesn't love me, and it doesn't mean we don't share affection with each other, but it does mean that one of the most important things, and it's important to me as well, by the way, because I know how I lived before, and I know how I live now, that I need that amount of wealth to be able to live a better life, enjoy going to Las Vegas or Los Angeles, which is where we go when we're in Phoenix, or when I'm in New York City. I like to go to New York City, enjoy the shows, the Broadway and all that, travel to Philadelphia, travel to, what's the other place we usually go to? I can't think. New Hope, Pennsylvania, where they have a lot of arts and crafts. So I enjoy that. I like to go to baseball games. I like to do all of that stuff that you need money to do. And I think money buys happiness. I firmly believe that. And I believe that without money, the happiness is devastatingly sadness. That's what I believe. It's funny, my computer dropped off in the background. I had some money pictures in the back, or what I have, a car in the background, I forget. Let's see if anyone has anything to say. Everyone, of course, is petrified. I won't call 480-236-2111, 480-236-2111. I'm not even having any hecklers call up tonight, which is okay. Like I said, I've kind of moved this show from me trying to actually build an audience to, at this point, I'm just trying to blow off steam or talk about a topic that I find interesting with the 8 people that have joined the show tonight. Richard says compound interest used to be a thing. Of course, it's not anymore. Not at all. I think everyone's got to have some liquid money that they can grab their hands on pretty quickly. At one time when I was broke, like I was telling you guys, I was living on Tasty Cakes. That's the Hostess of the East Coast. You can still get some of that stuff throughout the country. You can get some of that stuff in Phoenix. There's a place that sells Tasty Cakes, if you can believe that. And they're hideous. They're really a bad product. But if you got to live on something and you're a young guy and you got to eat something, you're going to get the clothes hanger in that machine, the vending machine, and you're going to get food out of that vending machine. But if there was popcorn in that vending machine, it was like I found liquid gold in that vending machine. They were higher up, so I had to get a longer clothes hanger to get to the popcorn. Pick the popcorn up, get it down, go to the microwave oven, and that was my dinner. And in that Tasty Cake, that was my dessert. Sometimes we didn't have popcorn in there. Tasty Cake and a second Tasty Cake was dinner and a dessert. It was a brutal life. I hate to remember it, but it was brutal. But it brings you back to when you got money to manage it more reasonably. Now, some people, when they have that money, and maybe they'll squander it because then suddenly they don't know how to handle the maximum amount of wealth. That guy from Fantasy Island, Herschel, I forget his last name, the short guy, the little tattoo. You know, actually, when he died, he was actually siphoning water from his next door neighbor. Water. I got to say water, not water. Otherwise, you think I'm from the East Coast, which I am. It's pronounced water when you're in Philadelphia. Water when you're on the West Coast. Herschel forget his last name, French last name. He was siphoning water from his next door neighbor. That's the way he was living at the final days of his life. Can you believe that? Tragic, absolutely tragic. See, anyone else have anything to say? Bimodal investment distributors are best, according to Amassim Taleb. Okay, so you can read that and check out what Dale is talking about. He's an interesting guy to talk to. Look what the boomers did, baby boomers. I'm not sure what, it was close to 8%. Yeah, at one point, you're right, Richard is correct. At one point, I remember the interest rates on just putting money in banks was like 7%. Of course, back then, home mortgages, my first home mortgage was 8.4%. And I got what's called first-time buyer money. So the interest rates then were like 13%. And I got in at 8.4% as a first-time buyer. So interest rates for home mortgages was intense. What are they now? Like 4.25%, something like that. And they were as low as like 3.1% at one point. I think 2.75 at one point. So it's unbelievable. But like I said, I believe that money buys happiness. Money can buy you happiness. Some people, it'll buy them happiness and they'll go and squander it. So eventually the happiness gets chewed away at from squandering the money, and then it becomes devastation because they can't get over the fact that they blew all that money, could have lived great, and right now they're living in a car, going from trash can to trash can, pulling stuff out. So it's brutal. But I got to tell you, for me, money definitely buys me happiness. It buys me a stressless life, or less stress. I've still got some stress. You know why? Because I am that guy that's driven, and I've got to achieve the next level of growth. I can't stay still. I'm not obsessed with it, but I am pretty much in touch with that realistic attitude that I've got in me. And that's the other reason I stopped radio. When I was doing the UFO show, to me, I didn't care about the finances of it. And I believe people like Heather Wade, who are trying to draw a career out of doing a radio broadcast, need the finances of that broadcast so that they can eat every night without having to get a clothes hanger and grab a tasty cake out of the machine. So they're living a different level of stress than me. My stress level from doing the UFO paranormal show was I wanted the audience to grow, not from an egotistical perspective, so that we would have more fun with the show. When the show wasn't growing with more and more viewers each and every show I did, for a variety of reasons. One reason is Facebook decided to crash the whole friggin' thing, which is why I do the show now on YouTube. But I decided that my drive and my ambition wanted the show to grow. Not from a financial perspective, but definitely from a listener perspective. And when it didn't, you know what? I kind of self-destructed. And I went off on a tangent. I went on rant and raves, and I'm still ranting about it to a degree. I self-destructed and imploded. So you can imagine if someone that can't eat at night because their radio show is not bringing enough finances into their household, to her mouth to be able to eat. Can you imagine the extreme stress of that? By far, much worse than my stress level is for just not having enough viewers. No one is ringing this phone to tell me what you think about it. If you think money is as important in your life, it is in mine. I am highly motivated by money. I am very happy when I've got money. And when I don't, for instance, my job is I'm a consultant. I rent myself out to the highest bidder, the ones that can afford my skill level. And I go work for them for sometimes 6-month contracts, sometimes 8-month contracts, sometimes a year contract. And after that year's over, or after that 6 months is over, I got to find my next gig. And that the stress level can build up there. You know why? Because I start counting the money that I'm not making day by day by day, week by week by week, and I count that almost as a loss. Even though I did great during the time I was employed, I start counting those gaps as money lost. That's a reality I face. Each and every client that's works has ended, where the contract with me has ended, and they don't want to renew me because they now want to hire a full-time employee to take over for that consulting work, or maybe there's not enough project work to keep me re-engaged, Or maybe I'm with a client that puts a limit of the amount of time they can engage you before they got to drop you off. In fact, Wells Fargo is like that. They'll hire you as a consultant for 24 months. Then you got a 6-month gap before you can come back and be renewed for another contract. Even if they got the work for you, they got to let you go. So during that gap, there's a stress level that people suffer, and I suffer from that because I am a guy that likes to be, and at least I'm honest about it. I'm very interested in cash, money, and an ability to live a better life year after year after year. And is that unusual, or is that unpopular, or is that something where you think I'm hostile for being honest about it? Briggs says, sounds like money buys you happiness and stress. I could be wrong. I would say money buys me happiness, but money also makes my life somewhat stressful because I want to move to that next avenue of success. In other words, when I'm on a consulting job for a year and then I've got that gap, I have a stress level during that gap where I want to make that gap smaller and smaller and smaller and non-existent so I can keep on making that money and not count the loss of revenue coming in. So Brig is correct. I do. Money buys me happiness and stress, but not as much stress as if I'm counting and living paycheck by paycheck, as some people do. And I believe maybe, I'm only guessing this, I'm believing that someone like Heather is probably suffering because she needs the revenue from that Art Bell legacy that she fell into, which she's got to drop that legacy crap, by the way, because you cannot piggyback on a legacy. For instance, I did a little broadcast earlier. I was talking about Frank Sinatra. Then there's a Frank Sinatra Jr. who had to live in his coattails, and then his voice is always going to be compared to Frank Sinatra Sr. And then you got Frank Sinatra Jr., who sounds similar, but he's not at all a Frank Sinatra Sr. The voice isn't there. Nancy Sinatra had an easier career. She was not going to be compared vocally to her father to the degree because it's a male voice versus female voice. So she had it easier. To have a legacy of Art Bell, leaving it to Heather Wade, or Heather Wade somehow or another fell into this, and then to continue on. What should have done is she should have just abandoned that whole idea, that whole concept, still used his equipment. If she wanted to do the show from Pahrump, which by the way, she should move the hell out of Pahrump. There's nothing to do in Pahrump. If she needs a day gig to compensate for the money that she's not making in radio, you ain't going to do it in Pahrump. I've actually seen videos of Pahrump. I looked one time at how many people live in Pahrump, what type of work they do. You can see the average money income from someone that lives in Pahrump. You got to get out of Pahrump. If you want to have another job so that you can afford to do radio and not suffer from the stresses of the lack of finances from radio or what radio is bringing you, then maybe you ought to get out of Pahrump. And just minimize. You don't even need the equipment that you're connected to in Pahrump via Art Bell having the equipment there for you to do the broadcast based upon utilizing his equipment, which is breaking down periodically from what I've heard. You can do your show with a lot less equipment than that and be a lot more portable. Forget about Pahrump. Forget about that equipment. Forget about the legacy and get your own gig going on, but have a job where the stresses won't be financial. She may have the same stresses that I'll have in building up the audience that isn't building up, and that's why I kind of crashed and burnt, because I honestly realized that I'm more driven than just to do the show for 24 or tonight 9 people. That's not to say I don't value the 9 people. It's just that I'm saying I want the show to grow to be more than 9 people, whether you consider it an ego or a bad. Whether I'm bad for wanting that, that's the way it is. That's the way I'm honest about it and upfront about it. And at least I know what I want. Some people don't know what they want, and they'll kid themselves. And in fact, when I first started doing the radio show, I was kidding myself. I was on there on the Art Bell Experience group, and I was saying I love to have all these people. We're great friends, and really, I still care about that audience. It's just that I started realizing that, Dave, you know what? You got to compare this to your day job. You want your day job to grow. You want your finances to grow so that you can retire. I could retire next year. I could retire now if I felt like it. But I don't want to because I still like doing that job to a degree. I don't love it like I used to. I like doing radio a whole lot more. But I wanted the radio career to grow in listener upon listener so we can all enjoy each other. And I started realizing, you know what, Dave, I'm bullshitting myself. I don't like to bullshit people, but I sure as hell was bullshitting myself into thinking I was satisfied with that. The bottom line is, in all reality, I got to be honest, I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted more people to enjoy each other, enjoy the guest, get better guests on because the audience was growing. When I couldn't get the guest on because the audience wasn't growing, I couldn't tell them, I wouldn't lie to them and say I got more visitors than, of course that would be completely a lie and they could see right through that quite easily. I had to be honest, and so I was honest with you guys and telling you I can't do that show anymore because I wanted more people. And you can consider that selfish if you want to. But let's see, I'm going to read some of the other comments here. Mary says, money builds a strong economy. We need to keep our jobs and businesses or we are a country, as a country, would die out. So money keeps you happy and able to survive. It's about time maybe some people started realizing that. And you know, that sometimes it gets into the politics of discussions where you know, everyone thinks that all the rich people are damaging the economy because they're just the guys that are overly greedy, and the poor people are suffering, the rich people are living like it's a game of Monopoly. I used to play Monopoly. And Monopoly is eventually one guy's got this tremendous wealth, everyone else is living in poverty row. That's the game of Monopoly. It's the game of life, actually. It's true. And it's unfortunate, but when you live in this country, you do have to plan ahead. You know, you hear a lot of people that complain about their current wealth. Did they ever think earlier in their lives, or didn't their parents ever tell them, okay, so now you're going to do this, but you know, to do this, you got to have these sacrifices and these goals. If you don't have these goals, then you're going to be suffering. And money, your parents should tell you, they should tell their kids. Money bought us happiness. You see, now we're watching TV tonight. We're enjoying a nice steak here. We had a little bit of wine. You enjoyed wine. You enjoyed the steak. You're old enough to drink wine. You're watching TV with us right now on a 58-inch screen TV, flat screen. You see, we're driving you around to soccer practice in our SUV, which is a Lexus SUV. Money has bought us happiness. It's bought you happiness right now. If you make the decision you want to make, you ain't going to be as happy as we are right now. And I'm telling you right now, you're going to suffer. You're not going to be happy. What you're going to be is sad. The rich and corps are taking more than a reasonable amount. We need a VAT tax. Value-added tax. That's what VAT tax stands for. That's that thing that they do in Canada, and I believe they do it in the UK as well. We need a value-added tax. The problem is what value is added onto that tax. You think about it from another perspective. There's a new tax that just came into existence. A new sales tax on eBay, by the way. I don't sell a whole lot of stuff on eBay. I buy more stuff than I sell. Now, every time I buy a product on eBay, after October 1st, which is this month, 21 days ago, on October 1st, in Arizona and 30 other states from what I've understood, the Supreme Court has made a ruling that they made it okay for states individually to decide if they want to charge sales tax on the products that sell online, which is eBay. The problem with that is, and I understand this, the perspective of this is, sometimes if you want to buy a product and you go to a store, you're going to have to buy the price of the product plus the sales tax and walk out of that store. If you got on eBay before October 1st, you can get on, buy the product, even if it was the same price, it's often free shipping and no sales tax. It was eating away at the storefronts that wanted you to go into the store, buy the product, and pay sales tax. The problem with eBay is there's a lot of individual sellers that aren't storefronts, and now when you buy from that individual seller, it's almost like going to a farmer's market or a garage sale where some guy has his garage door opening, selling stuff in there that belongs in his house, but he no longer wants it. He's going to what? Charge you sales tax? That's not going to change. Not going to see garage sales where sales tax is happening. So eBay, from the perspective of the individual seller, is almost that guy selling from his garage a one-off item, another one-off item, another one-off item, and now there's sales tax for these purchases. So we're talking about taxes here. Here's a new tax that penalizes the individual eBay sellers. And I'm one that sells stuff periodically. In fact, I've got 4 items on there right now that when a buyer buys my product, he may not even know it because it's just happened recently. He may see the receipt and says, oh my God, there's a sales tax. Now, why is Dave charging me sales tax? He'll think I'm charging him sales tax when eBay is, based upon the new laws that went into effect. There's a new tax. What value does it put on? I guess they're saying it puts the value of equalizing eBay storefronts, because some people sell a lot of product on eBay. Some people sell hundreds of thousands of products on eBay because they've got a store going on. Me, I think I bought and sold about 350 items combined because I'm selling one-off products. I'm not a storefront. So now someone's going to come to me and say, how come you're charging me sales tax? So there's going to be less purchases of my products because eventually people are going to say, there's no benefit now to buy from eBay. I might as well go to the store because I'm going to pay a sales tax. Same as I have to pay on eBay now. The same sales tax. There's a less of a benefit, and it's going to hurt more. It's going to put in line the storefront people on eBay and the storefronts of the physical brick and mortar stores that you could walk into and buy a product. It's not going to hurt them as much as it'll hurt people like you and me selling our one-off products. So before you start adding taxes to stuff, think about what it's going to do to the individual perspective. Dale says a VAT tax, each vendor in a supply chain for the VAT. I'm not going to read it because I don't have my glasses on to read it, but you can read it after the fact. I just wanted to say out there that the people that believe that money does not buy happiness, I actually sort of believe that is their excuse to make them feel more comfortable with the lack of money that they're making. And for the hardships they're going through, for the living paycheck by paycheck, that's the way they justify in their mind. They probably say before they go to sleep every night, they're saying, you know what? I don't need money because money doesn't buy happiness. Money buys you happiness. Trust me, money buys you happiness. It might buy you stress if you're one of those people is driven to make more and more money, and the spiral never ends, and you'll just get escalated more and more and more to want that account going from 100,000 to 200,000. 200,000 isn't enough. I want to hit that 500,000 mark. 500,000, you got to get to the million mark. So it's competitive to get to that level. Then you're going to buy that house in the neighborhood where you're at the bottom rung. You want to catch up to the guy next to you. Then you want to have the best house in that neighborhood. It can be an escalating fiasco that adds stress into your life unless you're moderately conscious about what reality is all about. Then money can buy you happiness. I firmly believe money can buy you stability, independence, and happiness. And I'm not ashamed to say that. If you watch the video that I was playing earlier, and you disagree with it, you probably disagree with me as well. But no one's really spoke up and said they disagree with me. No one's called up at 480-236-2111. It's too late now because I want to hang up the show in a couple seconds. But money buys me happiness. Money bought the computer I'm on right now. There was a guy out there not too long ago selling his desktop on Craigslist because he said he needed the money from his desktop, his sale of his desktop, because he didn't have money that month. That's brutal, selling your desktop to make how much you're going to make on it. It's a used desktop. At most, it's a Mac that costs you $3,000. And you've had it for 3 years. What are you going to sell it for now? Less than half of what you paid for, so you're going to sell it for what? $1,100. So you took a $1,900 loss on something that's 3 years old, and you need that $1,100 so you can live that month. Then after that, then you got to sell something else. It's a rough existence. Can you believe if that guy all of a sudden hit the lottery and now has $200,000? The same guy that was selling his desktop, now he's got $200,000. Is he going to be happy? He's going to wake up the next morning and be ecstatic. He's going to be so happy. Now, if he's an idiot, he's going to quit his day job because $200,000 is not going to take him through the rest of his life, depending on what age he is. If he's 90, it will. But if he's like 50 or 60, that $200,000 isn't going to get him to the end of his life. So he better not quit his job. So if he's the guy that gets that $200,000 and quits his job, then he's the guy that's going to suffer a consequence at the end because he lived in unreality. But in reality, that guy with the $200,000, he's going to be pretty happy. Money bought him happiness. Money buys me happiness. Money buys people happiness. they don't want to admit it, especially if they're some of the people that are unhappy because they're having financial difficulties and they want to reason it and rationalize it in their mind. Money doesn't buy me happiness. That's why I don't have it. That's why I don't strive for it. That's why I don't bust my ass getting 2 jobs. I've had 2 jobs at different times in my life. Absolutely. To build up to that next level of success. So maybe I can take a little bit of a breather and not have to work 2 jobs at 16 hours a day. And at one point I was working 16 hours a day, guys. At one point I was going to college and working as a blackjack dealer in Las Vegas and busting my ass to do both. Taking up full-time courses and working the graveyard shift to make ends meet so I could afford college the next day, the next week, the next month. So money buys you happiness. It's bought me happiness, and I don't mind admitting that. And I will admit that up front, honestly, and directly to you guys. And no one said anything else about that. And maybe you guys will afterwards. We'll see. That's all I got for tonight. I'm going to hang up and say goodnight. I'll see you guys Thursday, I think, with a music show. The final music show before I just sunset the entire thing and just do shows like this whenever I feel like the mood hits. And sometimes the mood hits a lot during the week. So sometimes you'll see me a lot. Sometimes the mood won't hit. I'll want to play the guitar, do some chord progressions, or work out a little heavier, or go out with my dog to the beach on the weekend. Then you won't see me at all. So it's kind of going to become up and down. Here I am, there I'm not. We'll see what happens. No regrets for the show that I attempted, but I've just attempted to live in reality and knowing what my reality is, what my goals are, what my intentions are. That's all I got. Let's see. Glenn says, dealer must hit on 16 and stand on 17. That's blackjack for you. There we go. By the way, the rules in Las Vegas are a lot different casino to casino. Although, by the way, I don't gamble anymore either. I never did gamble because when you're a blackjack dealer, you really know the odds are not in your favor. Although, supposedly, if you card count, you could turn the odds into your favor, I believe, by 1% in your favor. I'm not sure, but I'm not a card counter. I just decided not to take that stress level. That's got to be a stressful way to live, being a professional gambler. And I don't intend to do that, and I don't. So that's all I got for tonight, guys. I got to get out of here. Thanks for joining the show. And I'm going to say goodbye with the closing theme song of when I used to do the extraterrestrial show. So see you guys later on. Ciao.
Do you know the Dave Darren Show? He used to be on terrestrial radio, but he got fired.
Here comes the boss fella now.
Dave Darren.